Hi guys, it's Aoife from Words of Clover and I'm here with my July wrap up. I will try and do a video where I talk briefly about the books I read in April, May and June. I don't think I'll do dedicated videos for each one, but I might try and talk about I'll probably talk about like my best books and my worst books of those 3 months. But this one is my dedicated July wrap up. So let's just go. I read 13 books in July, so pretty good. June was a really bad reading month for me, so I'm really glad that July was better. The first book I read was an audiobook and it was a non-fiction, and that was Will by Will Smith. So it was Will Smith's memoir and it's narrated by him himself. So that was really, really fun. There's kind of some musical elements where he raps some songs that he wrote, and I didn't really know, obviously I know Will Smith and I know the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, but I didn't really know too much about his upbringing or his background. I didn't know that much about his relationships other than what kind of everyone knows, what the headlines are. So it was really, really interesting to read this book in his own words, his own opinion. So yeah, this was just a really, really enjoyable one for me, and really nice listen. And yeah, I really recommend, if you were at all interested in Will Smith, I would really recommend. I thought it was really interesting, his move from kind of rapper to actor, and how invested he got, how he kind of method acting a little bit in some ways, and how he kind of had to pull himself away from that, how it affected his relationships. I thought the way he talked about his current relationship with Jada Pinkett Smith is really interesting. Definitely coming out of this book, I had certain opinions about his family and how I feel like they treat him. Now I know we're obviously only getting one side of the story, and it's not necessarily that he painted them in a bad light, but there were definitely some actions there that I find that I kind of feel like, I don't know, it's kind of interesting. This was written and published obviously before the whole Oscar slap thing, and that would have been really interesting to read about. But knowing more about Will Smith from reading this book, I can see how he ended up letting himself do that. I can definitely see the characteristics that he talked about, kind of the bad sides of himself and the protective side of himself, particularly how he ended up letting himself lose control like that with Chris Rock. So it definitely made so much more sense after reading this book. So yeah, this was 4 out of 5 stars. I did really enjoy it, and I do recommend. The next book I read was Someday Maybe by Onyi Nwabineli, and this is one I actually did talk a good bit about in my mid-year check-in freakout tag that I will have uploaded before this video. So just to the dogs beside me and panting really loud, I'm so sorry. Yeah, so this one is really, really good, but as I said in my mid-year video, it's really, really sad, and it's really hard. There's really hard bits of it to read as well. So we are following a woman called Eve who has just lost her husband to suicide, and this book is following her in the first half year or so of that journey of being a widow and of dealing with her grief, or not dealing with her grief in some cases, and her friends and family trying to help her with that. And yeah, just kind of what it's like to be the person who's left behind, especially someone who never expected to be left behind, who had no idea her husband was suffering and is dealing with a lot of guilt about that, what it's like to be a family member of someone who died by suicide and how painful that is, and how many questions you were left with. And how I liked how this book also kind of tackled that whole thing of how sometimes you will never know the answers as to why someone decided to leave in that way, and there's not necessarily always going to be a note or a big detailed explanation of why the person has decided that they just can't go on any longer. Yeah, I did really enjoy this, but this definitely ripped my heart out of my chest quite a lot. It did definitely make me cry. I did really, really enjoy this, but definitely a hard one to read. But this was a 5 out of 5 stars. Absolutely love this, and will be reading more from this author for sure. The next book I read was Inheritance by Christopher Paolini. So I have been reading the last few months all the Aragon books because I want to read Myrta, which is the new one. So I finally read this one. This is like a beast of a book. It is 830 pages. So yeah, it took almost over a whole month to read because I was reading it kind of slowly, kind of at night time, reading bit by bit. So yeah, this is just following on with Aragon and Saphira. This is the last stretch of their journey to try and bring down Galbatorix, who is kind of the evil king of this this land, and also they're trying to learn kind of particular spells and magic and the lore of the dragons that can kind of help bring him down. So they end up learning a lot in this, and their magic really does grow from strength to strength, as does their bond. And we also are following some other characters, and we're following Roran, who is Galbatorix's, not Galbatorix's cousin, Aragon's cousin. And then we're also following Nasuada, who's kind of like the leader of the free people in this book. I do think she's a really good character. I do think that there are definitely in this book is better than like the previous books, where I do find that Christopher Paolini like could just be a little bit better in writing female characters, particularly like get female character POVs a little bit more. Roran I really loved the first time I read this series, and in this one I really actually didn't like him. And it just threw me off. I just was like, I don't know why, I just really am not. And then this time reading this series as well, the timeline of this book is wild. It definitely, like, the whole timeline of this book kind of takes place over the course of like less than a year, but it feels like it should take place over like 3 to 4 years. Like, it's absolutely insane if you think about the timeline. And I was like, why does it have to, like, why is the timeline so short, but then the books are so like slowly paced. So yeah, it just kind of, when you actually think about the timeline and the leaps and bounds that Eragon and Saphira like go in terms of like fighting and skills and growing and magic, it just makes no sense that it would take place in less than a year. So yeah, I think definitely there's like some things that I was like, okay, not so good, but I do just enjoy this world. I enjoy Saphira. I love the dragons in this. I love the dragon lore. And I am really looking forward to reading Murta to see how Christopher's writing has gotten better as he's gotten older as well, and kind of what kind of improvements or changes he wants to make with the world. And yeah, to revisit Murta as well, I think will be really, really fun. So I'm looking forward to that. And then after that as well, I did read the kind of the novella that comes after Inheritance, which is The Fork, the Witch, and the Worm, which are kind of like 3 short stories put together, and very much novella. While there's one with Angela, who's kind of like a witch, and which actually wasn't written by Christopher, it was written by his sister, who is also called Angela, I think. So I guess Angela Paolini is her name. She was like the inspiration behind Angela, so she wrote a story and put it in here. I'm not sure that story like really did anything for me. I don't think it adds anything to the overall the story as a whole, where I do think the 2 other ones by Christopher Paolini, so there's one following you're kind of following Eragon after the events of Inheritance and where he goes next, but we're also getting glimpses of Murta, so I find that one will be really interesting and probably really helpful going into the actual book about Murta, and kind of like really sparked my interest and my excitement for that. And then the last book was more about kind of like a particular race of people called Urgles, who are kind of like orc-like characters, and just their lore and their relationship with dragons, which was actually quite interesting as well. So I did enjoy those 2. But yeah, it was like a 3 out of 5 stars. It wasn't great, but if it's kind of something that if you really like the series, you will enjoy it as kind of like little Easter eggs, but it's not necessarily something that you have to read. I do think the one about Murta is interesting. And there is a little bit of hope at the end of this in terms of like the future of dragons, which is nice. So yeah, other than that, I did enjoy it. And after that, I read The Last Widow by Karin Slaughter, which is the 9th book in the Will Trent series. I did also talk about this in my mid-year check-in tag, because I absolutely love this one. This is another 5 out of 5 star read for me. This one we are following Will and his partner Sarah as they're just having like kind of a day off, and something like there's like an explosion happens, and obviously the 2 of them as first responders like immediately get into their car and go to help with this explosion. They obviously know something really big has happened, and on the way they see this car crash that's obviously somehow happened because of this explosion, and they stop to help. And during this, it turns out that the people that were in this car are actually somehow involved with causing that explosion, and Sarah gets kidnapped, and Will is left, wanting to, quite injured, but then wanting to do whatever he can to get Sarah back and to protect her. So we follow Sarah as she goes along with these people, has to try and figure out how to survive, and it turns out that it's kind of like this far right group who are intent on kind of changing politics, very kind of Republican, like super duper Republican ways of like not even normal Republicans would like agree with them. It's very and there's like some like similar events to the storming of the Capitol in the US a few years ago. There's kind of a similar events that happen in this one, which is interesting because this one actually was written, I think, before that ever even happened. So I think Karin Slaughter is really good at kind of seeing what is happening in the grander sphere of things, and kind of seeing how she can like include them in her book. She kind of can see what things are starting to spark and maybe kind of causing issues, and she is able to write them into her books very well. So yeah, I just really love this. I love this in terms of the last part of this book, like the last page. Karin Slaughter like knows what to do. She had a last page in her Grant County series book that literally made me want to throw my phone across the room because I was so upset about it. And then the last page and the last like words in this book made me want to squeal with happiness because I was just all for it. So yeah, she's like it swings and roundabouts with her, but I really enjoyed it. And then unfortunately after that, I'm going to the worst book I read so far this year, which was a 1.5 stars, and Children of Anger and Anguish by Tomi, the third and final book in the Children of Orisha series. The first one was Children of Blood and Bone, which was very, very popular a few years ago. And then she did Children of Virtue and Vengeance, which came out, I think, just pre-pandemic, I think. I think it was 2019 that came out. And yeah, I was quite excited for this. I don't know who, it does the cover arts for all of her books because they are all absolutely stunning. I absolutely love them. But unfortunately, the cover is the only thing that is good about this book. Everything that happened in the first two books in this, we're following a group of people we're following a character called Zelly first off, and she is part of a group of people called Orisha or Magi, and she is basically able to wield kind of magic, but because of something that happened like 10 to 12 years previously, magic is actually like outlawed and has kind of disappeared. And then things happen and magic comes back and Zelly gets her powers back, and then that kind of sparks an uprising among the Magi against the crown to basically get their freedom back and get their rights back. And we are following kind of two different sides of that fight. So the first two books are about that, and Zelly's going through a lot of up and downs, and we're also following other characters, Amari, who is actually the princess of this land, but she is on Zelly's side, and then we are also following Anan, who is Amari's brother, but he is on the crown's side, but him and Zelly have kind of like a love-hate relationship, and yeah, this was just really bad. Everything that happened in the first two books kind of became a little bit obsolete for some reason. We had a brand new kind of main character, brand new villain, brand new magic system. I basically feel if this book had been introduced kind of halfway through the second book, and we got a bit more context about everything that in this book, and the third book was kind of, I don't know, better. The whole series would have been better. Just to have what was in this book thrown in the last part was just so ridiculous, and I just don't understand it at all. I just think the author, the editors, publishers made a huge mistake with this book. And yeah, I don't know whether hype or pressure or whatever got to the author, but it just was such a tank. It was just really bad. And like, her ideas are there, but the story, just the way the story changed, it was just so weird. And a character who's like a main character in the second book and a really strong love interest completely disappeared, and it was just really weird. And it was like, where is this guy? He gets mentioned once in kind of like oh, I wonder where he is. Never mentioned again, never shows up again. Completely weird. Have never seen anything like it in a book, and yeah, this was just really, really disappointing. So yeah. The next book I read then was The Villa by Jess Ryder. So this is a book I did say I wanted to read at the start of the year because this is about actually a hen party where the bride is called Aoife, and on her hen party she is murdered. And then we're following basically her friends 3 years later as they go back to the place where this happened to try and kind of figure out what did actually ever happen to Aoife. So I wanted to read this obviously because I was going on my hen party this year. I did go on my hen party in July. I had a really good time, and I read this like before that, just kind of like I was in the hype. I was really excited for my hen party, and I was like, let's read a book about a bride called Aoife who gets killed. This was good. I don't know if I enjoyed it a bit more just because of what I was going on my hen party and excited for it, so I was kind of like buzzing about that, so it kind of made this book better for me. But I think as a thriller, it was good. I do think this would be a really good one, to bring on holiday or to read by the pool. It's not the best thriller ever, but I think there's parts of it that are really, really good. So as I said, we are following we're mostly following a character called Danny, who is Aoife's like best friend, and she's the one who can't remember basically anything about the night that Aoife died, and she wants to go back to try and like retrace her steps to try and actually figure out what happened. And she kind of tricks the other friends into going back to the same place and for them to try and like retrace their steps, as I said. And we're kind of seeing how we're kind of going have like a present and past storyline. We're seeing like what happened on the hen leading up to Aoife's death, and then we're also seeing the present storyline of the hens being back in the same place and going through all these like crazy feelings about being back and kind of tensions and secrets coming out and stuff like that. Yeah, so it was fun. I do think as hen parties go, this was like really kind of ridiculous. Some of the things that like were happening, it did feel like probably the shittest hen party of all time. I was like, if this was a hen party that had been organized for me, I would have been really mad. Like 4 people going, in the middle of nowhere. Like the activities aren't really good, and yeah, it's just kind of, it was from the start. You're kind of like, okay, like this is like pretty bad. I do think there were some things that were like revealed near the start in certain POVs about other characters. I feel like they could have been left a little bit longer, because at the start you do find out some things that you're like, okay, well, this person is obviously a bit suspicious, and we're going to continue to be suspicious of them throughout the whole thing because their actions just keep getting worse. And we can see there's like issues there. But yeah, I did like how this ended up. There is a kind of like a content warning here for sexual assault. And yeah, the ending was kind of like, I don't know whether I could say, it wasn't predictable, but it wasn't necessarily a huge surprise either. But I did enjoy my time reading this. I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. And yeah, the next book I read was a audiobook, and it was Kololo Hill by Neemah Shah. This is a book that's historical fiction. It starts off in Uganda, and we're following basically a Ugandan Asian family who are obviously told in 1970, all Ugandan Asians were basically told that they had to leave Uganda. Some of them went back to India, some of them went to the UK or to other parts, and we're following this family kind of as they learn that they're kind of like, as tensions are rising, and then as they learn that they have to leave. I have read another book before about this topic, and this is kind of similar. The 2 books kind of ended up kind of doing the same thing, where the history is really interesting, the setting's really interesting, but then the book kind of ends up meandering into kind of nothing. And this was the same. This was kind of like quite character focused in parts, which I did enjoy. But then when they get to England, they kind of start their new life, and it kind of felt like, I don't know, I just kind of felt like nothing was happening, and I just wanted more from it. I would love to read more books from this topic. As I said, I do think that this moment in history is really, really interesting. It didn't happen that long ago, and it's just kind of crazy to think about. So yeah, I would like to read more books. So if people do have books about the Ugandan Asian, I don't know whether you call what being expelled from Uganda, that are good, I would be really interested in reading them. But yeah, this one was okay. It was like 3 out of 5 stars. Then I read a book that had been on my TBR shelf for quite a while. That is Maps of Our Spectacular Bodies by Maddie Mortimer. This is kind of I guess I call it maybe a literary fiction type of novel. It's quite interesting in terms of the author kind of plays with form a little bit, as you can see from here. There's parts of it that are quite quick to read. We're following a character called Leah, who has cancer. At the very start of the book, we find out that she has had cancer in the past and it has now come back, and it's obviously come back worse. And we're following her as she continues kind of again onto her cancer journey. We're also learning about her past, particularly her childhood and her teenage years, and a romantic relationship that she had in her teenage years that was very, very influential into the person she ended up becoming and affected her quite a bit. And yeah, we're kind of learning all about that. We're also seeing her relationship with her daughter Iris, who is 12, I think, in this book, and kind of, yeah, that relationship just between them, they're very, very close. But then Leah is kind of, she's dying basically in this book, and we're seeing how the two of them are kind of like figuring that out. And then also Leah's relationship with her husband as well, and you know, the fact that she is dying and she wants him to continue to live a lovely life after she is gone and to find someone new, and having conversations about that. And then like the different parts in this book that kind of like break up the chapters. Sometimes that like we get chapters that are like, or parts that are almost told by the cells in Leah's body, like the cancer cells, and then the chemo, and then the cells that are trying, her antibodies, and the cells that are trying to make her better. And And it's just really interesting kind of seeing that kind of play out as well. I kind of liked the way that was done. It did take me probably about a quarter of the book to really get into the flow of how the story is told, but then once I did, it flew by really fast and I did really, really enjoy it. There's parts of it that are very sad. There are parts of it that are quite shocking in terms of some of the things that happened to Leah when she was a teenager. Like, I kind of felt that the relationship in this was consensual, but I don't think it was right in terms of age. It's probably the best way to talk about it. Like, I think he was maybe 19 and she was 14. Like, yeah, that's a bit iffy for me. So yeah, but I did enjoy this, and it's not a book that I keep on my shelves, but like, I enjoyed it, and I'm glad I finally read it because it was something that I wanted to read for quite a while. And then I read the third book in the Anguish series by Elizabeth Strout. This is Willam, so this is following Lucy Barton. So if you read My Name is Lucy Barton, this is the third book in that series. They're kind of like snapshots, short stories. Lucy Barton, this one, they're all very like gentle, and there's not a real like plot in them. You're just kind of being told. It almost feels like it's like a non-fiction being told by Lucy Barton. And in this book, we're being told about Lucy's kind of relationship with her first an ex-husband, Willam. And as they get older and they're in like, I don't know, their 70s and 60s, I guess, and their relationship as they get older, and things that Willam was going through that Lucy helped, and she's thinking about her second husband who died recently and how she loved him so much, and how their relationship worked in terms of, and how her relationship with Willam didn't work, but then they still are very, very good friends. And then also their relationship with their children and their children's relationship with each other and to them. And yeah, she goes on a journey with Willam at one point in terms of his family and his family history. And yeah, it's enjoyable. I gave this like a 3.5 out of 5 stars. Not my favorite one, but I do find these books just like really relaxing to read. There's just something about, I don't know whether it's Elizabeth Strout's writing and Lucy Barton in particular, because I do also love Olive Kitteridge, but I also tend to read all of these books by audiobook, and they're all narrated by Kimberly Farr, and she is just the most wonderful like narrating voice. And her voice, I hear her voice and I just think of Olive Kitteridge and of Lucy Barton, and yeah, I just find it really, really relaxing. So I do just really enjoy my time when I'm listening to these audiobooks, even if nothing really is happening in the story. I'm still really enjoying them. Then after that, I finished Ruthless Vows by Rebecca Ross. This is the second book in the Letters of Enchantment duology. So this finished up the duology. The first book is Divine Rivals, which is very, very hyped. So in this one, we are continuing to follow Roman and Iris, who are two war correspondents in this war of gods. And after we see them they go from like lovers to enemies to lovers in the first book, and then in this book we see them being separated from, after like some terrible things that happen at the end of the first book. They're separated at the start of this book, and Roman in particular is in a very, very precarious situation that's very, very dangerous for him, and we're trying to see if he'll be able to find his way back to Iris, and if Iris will be able to find her way to him, and if they'll be able to reconnect. And we're seeing as the gods' war gets closer and closer and closer to the main city that we know of in this world, and how people are going to, if people are going to survive it, what's going to happen. The letters that Roman and Iris write kind of do play a big part in this book again, and there's just something about this book that is just so romantic and so soft, and I just love the relationship between Roman and Iris so much, and the way they write to each other is just, yeah, like, I mean, we're all book lovers, we're all readers, so you write a romantic letter, I am like putty in your hand, like, and that's what this book basically is. It's like this big like romantic letter to each other, and I just love it so much. And I did really enjoy how this book ended. I do think like the kind of final showdown with the gods could have been like a little bit more dramatic, but I don't think that's necessarily what this book was about. The main focus was kind of like Roman and Iris, and the gods were kind of like more background in the war. But I did really enjoy it, and I gave this like a 4.5 out of 5 stars. And yeah, there was kind of like a nice kind of cottagecore cozy feeling to the end of it that I really enjoyed as well. So yeah, a very easy read for me, and one I really, really enjoyed. And I think Rebecca Ross just has a really lovely voice in terms of soft romantic fantasy. She's able to write duologies in particular really well, I think. And I read 4 of her books now, and 3 out of 4 of them I've really, really loved. And yeah, she's someone who I will continue to read. She's like a repeat author for me. So yeah, really looking forward to reading more of her books. I think I need to read another duology by her. And after that, I think I maybe read all of her books. I'm not sure. And then the last book I read was a very old NetGalley book I needed to read, and it was kind of like a horror thriller type of book, and it was called The Visitors by Catherine Burns. In this book, we're following Marion, who is 50-something years old. She lives with her brother John, who is older than her. The two of them have never been married. They've always just lived with each other. They're living in their family home that they lived in from when they were children. And Marion is a little bit, it's not that she's like special, there's anything wrong with her. She's just like very socially not good. She didn't have any friends like growing up. She's just a little bit odd in her own way, and as I said, like the only person she really converses with day to day is her brother John, who seems to be maybe slightly a sociopath. And he has a cellar, and he is keeping something in the cellar that Marion knows is probably bad, but she kind of just ignores it for peace of mind for herself, I guess. And yeah, it's kind of, yeah. So we're following Marion as we're just following Marion as she's kind of like living her life. It's not a very nice life, or a very like nothing really happening type of life. And then John, well, the blurb of this book is that John gets a heart attack and she has to finally kind of confront what's in the cellar. That is not what this book is about. That is a very, very, very misleading blurb, because I kept waiting and waiting and waiting for this heart attack to happen. And I'm not even joking, it happened 85% into the book. So the whole rest of the book was learning about Marion, her childhood, her relationship with John, her relationship with her mother, different things that happened to them as children, what she's kind of like as like a woman now, and the kind of interaction she's had, the way she kind of goes into kind of like a fantasy land, kind of dreaming up scenarios where she has like a family or like a husband, or that kind of thing. So yeah, the blurb is really misleading. So it's very much more of a character focused novel on Marion herself. And I'm going to be honest, I just kept picturing her as year one from Baby Reindeer. Martha from Baby Reindeer, and that is basically who I pictured her the whole time. Obviously like a kind of older version of that, but yeah. So this one was okay. I thought like in terms of character building, it was good. The ending was kind of creepy. It definitely gave me Liz Nugent vibes, particularly like Liz Nugent is really, really good at doing these morally grey characters and very character focused thriller type of psychological books. So this one was very similar. I just think Liz Nugent does it better. So I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. And yeah, I just wish the blurb hadn't been that blurb, because I just felt like I was just spending the whole book waiting for something to happen that like did happen, but happened so far into the book that like so yeah, everything I read in July. Let me know what you guys think. If there's any comments, please leave them down below. I would love to chat, and I'll see you guys again next time. Bye.